Europe, a continent forged in fire, bathed in blood and shaped by dreams. For centuries, it has been a battleground of empires, a crucible of conflict and a beacon of civilization. From the heights of ancient Rome to the depths of world wars, there has been one recurring obsession, one idea that has gripped the minds of rulers, visionaries and conquerors alike. The dream of a united Europe, a single empire, one nation under one rule. But in the quest for this elusive dream, Europe has been down a path of darkness, betrayal and ruin. The Romans were the first to dare to unite Europe under a single banner. Their legions marched across vast swathes of land, bringing with them the laws, culture and might of the Roman Empire. But this unity came at a cost that would haunt Europe for centuries. By the 2nd century AD, the Roman Empire stretched from the Atlantic shores to the sands of the Middle East. But it was an empire built on conquest, sustained by the sword and destined to fall. And fall it did. Torn apart by enemies from within and without, its dreams of unity crumbling into the dust of history. The Dark Ages descended, and with them the dream of a united Europe seemed lost forever. Or was it? Out of the darkness of the Middle Ages, new powers arose, each one reaching for that same dream. But Europe was now a land of countless kingdoms, duchies and fiefdoms, each with its own ruler, each with its own ambition. The Holy Roman Empire, born in the year 800 under Charlemagne, sought to restore the unity of Rome under the banner of Christianity. Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans by the Pope himself, a fusion of Roman grandeur and Christian piety. But the reality was far from the ideal. The Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor truly an empire. It was a fragile patchwork, a symbol more than a reality, and its efforts to unite Europe would falter, setting the stage for the next great contender. The late 18th century brought revolution to the heart of Europe. The French Revolution unleashed a wave of change that swept across the continent, tearing down the old order and giving birth to new ideas: liberty, equality, fraternity. But from the ashes of the revolution, one man would rise with a vision that went beyond France. Napoleon Bonaparte, a brilliant general with boundless ambition, dreamed of a Europe united under French rule. He sought to spread the ideals of the revolution by force, conquering territory after territory. For a moment it seemed he might succeed, but like all those who came before him, Napoleon's dream would be shattered on the frozen fields of Russia. And finally, at the bloody Battle of Waterloo, Europe breathed a sigh of relief, but the question lingered: who would try next? In the 19th century, the balance of power in Europe was once again upended. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870–71 was a lightning conflict that reshaped the continent. Orchestrated by Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, this war was the final piece in a masterful plan to unite the disparate German states under Prussian leadership. On the fields of France, Prussian forces emerged victorious, and in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the German Empire was born. This newly forged nation, powerful and ambitious, would soon set its sights beyond its newly created borders, driven by a growing belief that to survive and thrive, it needed to expand, an idea that would come to be known as Lebensraum. Lebensraum, living space, was a concept that began to take root in the German consciousness in the late 19th century. Bismarck's unification of Germany had created a nation that was powerful but also hungry. Industrial growth and a rapidly expanding population led many to believe that Germany needed more territory and more resources to secure its future, to provide for its people, and to compete with the ever-expanding British Empire and the vast resources of the rising United States. What began as a strategic ambition would later be twisted into a justification for aggression, conquest, and unimaginable horror. World War I, the Great War, was unlike any conflict Europe had ever seen. Over 4 years, the war claimed millions of lives and left deep scars across the continent. France and Germany, the two great rivals, bled heavily. But while the battlefields ravaged France and Belgium, German industry remained largely intact, protected by the distance from the front lines. In French and Belgian towns, factories lay in ruins. In Germany, production continued, setting the stage for future conflict. The seeds of resentment and revenge were sown as both sides emerged from the war exhausted, but far from finished. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was meant to bring peace, but instead it imposed harsh penalties on Germany. Stripped of territory, burdened with reparations and blamed for the war, Germany seethed with anger. The dream of unity had turned into a nightmare as the victors sought to punish rather than rebuild. Economic hardship, political instability, and a sense of injustice simmered beneath the surface. In the aftermath of such devastation, there were those who sought a different path. Aristide Briand of France and Briand-Stresemann of Germany, both statesmen committed to peace, proposed a radical idea: a European Union. Their vision was one of cooperation, binding nations together to prevent future wars. Initially, their proposal was met with hope and optimism. A union, they argued, would create economic stability and mutual respect among former enemies. But as the details emerged, so did the reservations. Binding nations together meant ceding powers to a central authority, entering a customs union that would control trade and economic policies. Smaller nations feared losing their sovereignty, and many realized that such a union would place Germany as the largest nation at the helm. The dream of peace through unity was clouded by the reality of control and dominance. Meanwhile, in the ruins of post-war Germany, a new figure emerged: Adolf Hitler, a man with his own vision of European unity. Hitler's dream was not of a peaceful Europe, but of a Europe under Nazi domination, a continent cleansed of those he deemed unworthy and expanded to fulfill Germany's need for Lebensraum. His rise to power was swift, his ambitions terrifying, and soon Europe was plunged into the abyss of World War II. The continent was once again engulfed in flames as the dream of unity became a nightmare of unimaginable horror.
Precisely at dawn on September 1st, without warning, the German Wehrmacht rolled over the Polish border. Before the invasion was 30 minutes old, the planes of the Luftwaffe were over Poland.
When the dust of World War II finally settled, Europe lay in ruins. Germany was severed in two, with the Soviet Union dominant in the east. The United States, now the dominant global power, stepped in with the Marshall Plan, offering aid to rebuild Western Europe's shattered economies. But even as Europe began to recover, old rivalries and new ambitions simmered beneath the surface. From the ashes, an old idea was resurrected: European Union. Could Europe finally find peace through unity, or was this just another way to exert control in a different way? In 1950, French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman made a bold declaration: a plan to pool France and Germany's coal and steel, the essential resources needed to make war under a common authority. It was a radical idea, one that aimed to make war between these old enemies not just unthinkable, but impossible. The European coal and steel community was born, and with it, the first steps toward a united Europe. The dream of a united Europe took another step forward in 1957 with the signing of the Treaty of Rome, establishing the European Economic Community. The goal was clear: to create a common market where goods, services and people could move freely across borders, but beneath the surface tensions remained. Would this economic unity bring about the political stability Europe so desperately needed, or would it drive a deeper wedge between its nations? The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was a moment of triumph. The reunification of East and West Germany, perhaps a sign that Europe could finally overcome its divisions. The collapse of the Soviet Union 2 years later, ending the tensions of the Cold War, seemed to signal a new opportunity for Europe. In 1992, the Maastricht Treaty took Europe even further down the path of integration, creating the European Union as we know it today. The introduction of the euro promised to bind Europe's economies closer together, creating a single currency for a single market. But as the financial crises of the early 21st century would show, the dream of unity came with a heavy price. Countries like Greece, Italy and Spain found themselves struggling under the weight of a currency they couldn't control. Was the euro truly a symbol of unity, or a chain that bound Europe's nations in ways they hadn't foreseen? As the European Union expanded eastward, bringing in former Soviet states, new tensions began to rise. Russia, once the dominant force in Eastern Europe, now saw the EU as an encroaching threat. The dream of a united Europe was once again under siege, this time from the east. And as the crisis in Ukraine would prove, the idea that the EU could bring lasting peace to Europe was to be put to the ultimate test. Today, the struggle for influence in Europe is once again marked by conflict. As the war in Ukraine pits Russia against NATO, each side vying for control and dominance. The European dream of peace in Europe hangs by a thread. Some in Russia see the expansion of NATO and the European Union as a new form of Lebensraum, a drive to encroach upon Russian influence and territory. The dream of a peaceful and united Europe seems more distant than ever, as old rivalries and new tensions threaten to plunge the entire continent into chaos once again. The outcome of the devastating conflict in Ukraine is today unknown. The history has yet to be written. An important question remains. Are the darkest periods of European history the consequence of its failure to unite as one nation? Or is the historic pattern of destruction the result of repeated attempts, whether by force or stealth or a combination of both, to bind together diverse independent nations that value their sovereignty, their independence and their democratic freedoms? Is the quest for European unity a path to peace or, as in the past, inevitably a path to destruction? The future will decide.